Beneath the cobblestone streets and towering castles of the medieval world, an entire hidden civilization thrived, one built not in the light of day, but in the quiet darkness below. While we often picture knights and kings when we think of this era, some of history's most astonishing engineering marvels were never meant to be seen. Underground, medieval mines crafted systems so advanced they rival the ingenuity of modern technology. These weren't just tunnels or storage pits, they were lifelines, defenses, and the very foundations of empires. And today, we're going to uncover them. Picture this: a city under siege, its walls surrounded by enemies, its people trapped with no escape. But beneath their feet, a secret network of tunnels delivers fresh water, stores enough grain to last years, and even provides hidden passage to safety. This wasn't fantasy, it was reality for countless medieval communities. From the vast underground aqueducts of Persia to the labyrinthine escape routes beneath European castles, these innovations didn't just save lives, they shaped the course of history. How did they achieve such feats without the tools we take for granted today? The answers lie buried in the earth, waiting to be rediscovered. This is a journey into the unseen brilliance of the medieval world. Over the next 25 revelations, we'll explore how underground innovations powered entire civilizations, how they kept cities alive during famine, turned the tide in wars, and preserved knowledge that might have otherwise been lost to time. Some of these structures were so well hidden they've only been uncovered in recent decades. Others remain shrouded in mystery, their full purposes still debated by historians. But one thing is certain: beneath the surface of history, there are stories of resilience, creativity, and sheer human determination that will leave you in awe. So let's dig deeper, literally, and uncover the secrets that medieval civilizations left beneath our feet. The past has never been so fascinating. Water was the lifeblood of medieval cities, and securing it meant the difference between survival and collapse. But how do you protect something as vital as a water supply when enemies surround your walls? The answer lay beneath the earth. Underground aqueducts became the hidden arteries of medieval civilization, silently channeling water through miles of hand-carved tunnels with astonishing precision. These weren't just ditches, they were feats of hydraulic engineering that rival modern water systems in their ingenuity. Take the Khanats of Persia, for example. These ancient underground channels, some dating back over 3,000 years, stretched for dozens of miles across arid landscapes, delivering water to desert cities and oases. But here's what's truly remarkable: medieval engineers across Europe and the Middle East adapted and expanded these techniques without the benefit of lasers, GPS, or even basic surveying tools we take for granted today. The secret lay in their understanding of gravity and slope. Builders would dig vertical shafts at intervals, sometimes hundreds of feet deep, to access groundwater. Then, using nothing but picks, shovels, and candlelight, they'd tunnel horizontally between these shafts, maintaining just enough downward slope to keep water flowing steadily, often no more than a 1-degree incline. A slight miscalculation could mean stagnant water or destructive erosion, yet these tunnels functioned flawlessly for centuries. Some even had built-in filtration systems with layers of gravel and sand to purify the water as it traveled. But perhaps the most brilliant aspect of these aqueducts was their invisibility. Unlike Roman above-ground aqueducts, which were vulnerable to attack, medieval underground systems remained hidden from invading armies. During sieges, while enemies camped outside city walls, residents could still draw fresh water from secret access points. The tunnels themselves were often narrow and winding, making them easily defensible. A single guard could hold off intruders in these claustrophobic passages. The legacy of these systems lives on today. In Spain, the acequias of Granada still use medieval Moorish underground channels to irrigate farms. In Italy, parts of ancient subterranean aqueducts were incorporated into Renaissance water systems. And in the Middle East, some qanats remain in use after millennia, a testament to their flawless design. These buried waterways didn't just quench thirst, they allowed civilizations to flourish in the most unlikely places, turning parched lands into gardens and transforming military strongholds into impregnable fortresses. The next time you turn on a tap, remember the concept of reliable water delivery wasn't born in the modern era. It was perfected centuries ago in the quiet darkness beneath medieval streets. Castles may have been symbols of power, but their greatest defense often lay in their ability to disappear. When armies stormed the gates, when flames licked at the walls, the difference between life and death wasn't just the strength of the stones above, it was the hidden pathways below. Secret escape tunnels twisted beneath medieval strongholds like veins of survival, engineered with cunning precision. Take the Tunnel of Orvieto, carved deep beneath the Italian cliffside town. This wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a masterpiece of covert engineering. Nearly a mile long, it descended through solid rock, its entrance concealed behind a seemingly ordinary well. Nobles could vanish mid-siege, emerging silently at the base of the cliffs near the Paglia River, where horses waited to whisk them to safety. But Orvieto was just one thread in a vast underground web. Across Europe, castles boasted tunnels with ingenious disguises. Some hid behind false walls in pantries or chapels, their doors blending seamlessly with the masonry. Others began in the depths of dungeons where prisoners' screams masked the sound of conspirators slipping away. The Bohemian castle of Zivakov had a tunnel that emptied into a river. Escapees would plunge into the water, their pursuers none the wiser. And beneath Malta's fort St. Angelo, a passage led directly to the harbor where galleys stood ready to sail. What's astonishing isn't just their existence, but their psychological brilliance. These tunnels were more than physical exits, they were weapons of morale. Defenders could hold out longer, knowing retreat was possible. Invaders, meanwhile, wasted precious hours searching for rulers who'd already evaporated. Some tunnels even doubled as traps, with dead ends or collapsing sections to ensnare pursuers. The Welsh castle of Dynfor included a tunnel that abruptly narrowed, forcing armored knights to shed their gear or get stuck, a bottleneck of humiliation. Yet the true marvel lies in their construction. Without blueprints or modern tools, laborers chiseled these passages by torchlight, often working from both ends to meet in perfect alignment. The acoustics were deliberate. Too many tunnels amplified footsteps, alerting defenders to intruders, and they weren't just for elites. At Austria's Hohenwürfen castle, an entire network allowed townsfolk to flee during raids, proving these weren't just escape routes for the privileged, they were communal lifelines. Today, archaeologists still uncover new tunnels, their purposes sometimes baffling. Beneath Scotland's Craigmillar Castle, a passageway ends abruptly at a sheer drop. Was it unfinished or a deliberate decoy? The mystery lingers, much like the whispers of those who once fled through these shadowed corridors. These tunnels remind us that medieval survival wasn't just about standing tall, it was about knowing when to vanish. A city under siege wasn't just fighting armies, it was racing against time. Without fresh supplies, even the strongest walls couldn't stop starvation. But medieval engineers turned to the earth itself for a solution, carving vast underground granaries that could outlast any blockade. These weren't mere storage pits, they were climate-controlled marvels, designed with such precision that grain could stay edible for up to 5 years. Take the Maltese granaries honeycombed beneath the island's limestone bedrock. Some chambers stretched over 30 feet deep, their walls lined with a special plaster that absorbed excess moisture. The design was deceptively simple. Narrow entrance shafts minimized air exchange, while the natural coolness of the earth maintained a steady temperature, slowing mold and pests. But the real genius lay in the details. In Turkey's Cappadocia region, underground silos featured ventilation chimneys that created passive airflow, preventing humidity buildup without any moving parts. Norwegian stave churches stored grain in elevated wooden bins within their subterranean crypts, using resin-rich timber as a natural insect repellent. And in Poland, grain pits were lined with layers of straw and clay, an ancient insulation system that kept temperatures within a narrow, ideal range year-round. The impact of these innovations was staggering. During the Siege of Rhodes in 1480, the Knights Hospitaller survived a 4-month blockade thanks to their underground reserves. Venetian records show their grain stores in Crete could feed 15,000 people for 2 years. But perhaps most impressive was how these systems required no external power, just a deep understanding of materials and thermodynamics. Some granaries even doubled as emergency shelters, with hidden compartments for valuables or documents. Archaeologists still find traces of these systems today, patches of unusually fertile soil marking long collapsed chambers, or ancient ledgers detailing exact storage durations. These silent, subterranean larders didn't just preserve grain, they preserved civilizations, turning desperation into defiance. While kings and knights fought above ground, the true battle for survival was won below, in the quiet darkness where ingenuity met necessity. Beneath the flickering candlelight of medieval churches, another world waited in the shadows, not just of the dead, but of the living. Hidden crypts and catacombs formed sprawling underground cities of the deceased, yet their purpose stretched far beyond burial. These labyrinthine passages became sanctuaries for persecuted faiths, hideouts during raids, and even clandestine classrooms for forbidden knowledge. The catacombs beneath Paris tell a particularly gripping tale. Stretching over 200 miles, enough to reach from Paris to Brussels if laid end to end, these tunnels held the bones of 6 million people, stacked in intricate patterns along the walls. But during the French Revolution, they also sheltered royalists fleeing the guillotine, their whispers echoing between skulls. What's striking is how these spaces balanced reverence with raw utility. In Rome's catacombs of Domitilla, early Christians scratched fish symbols into the walls as secret identifiers, while also carving out hidden chambers for worship when their faith was outlawed. The decorations weren't mere ornamentation, they were coded messages. Vines symbolized eternal life, anchors represented hope, and peacocks denoted resurrection, all painted in vibrant pigments that defied the darkness. Even the architecture served dual purposes. Ventilation shafts disguised as decorative niches kept air fresh for living occupants, while false walls concealed escape routes. Some crypts took this duality further. Beneath Vienna's St. Michael's Church, a crypt preserved noble bodies in ornate coffins, but its hidden side chambers stored emergency food supplies during Ottoman sieges. The monks of Sedlec Ossuary in Bohemia went furthest, arranging skeletons into chandeliers and coats of arms, transforming mortality into macabre art. This wasn't just about conserving space, it was a visceral reminder that death and life were intertwined. Modern excavations reveal even darker ingenuity. In Edinburgh's South Bridge vaults, archaeologists found evidence of underground taverns operating beside burial niches, a jarring mix of revelry and repose. And beneath Malta's capital, secret passages connected catacombs to coastal caves, allowing smugglers to move goods unseen. These spaces didn't just house the dead, they sustained the living through war, persecution, and plague. Today, as tourists walk these dim corridors, few realize they're treading on medieval survival blueprints where every skull-lined wall once whispered secrets, and every turn held the promise of refuge. The medieval world ran on salt and iron not just as commodities, but as the very foundations of power. And to secure them, miners descended into darkness where sunlight never reached, armed with nothing but hand tools and flickering flames. The Wieliczka salt mine in Poland stands as perhaps the most astonishing example, a labyrinth so vast it housed chapels, stables, and even underground lakes within its glittering salt walls. But this was no isolated wonder across Europe and the Middle East. Medieval miners tunneled deeper than ever before, extracting wealth from the earth with methods that balanced brute force with breathtaking ingenuity. Lighting these abysses presented the first formidable challenge. Without electricity, miners relied on fire, a perilous solution in oxygen-starved tunnels. The solution, specially designed oil lamps with curved backs that could be wedged into cracks, their wicks trimmed to burn just bright enough for work but not so fiercely as to deplete precious air. In some mines, reflective sheets of polished metal lined the walls, bouncing dim light further into the depths. The silver mines of Germany's Harz Mountains took this further, using hollowed-out animal horns filled with fish oil, their translucent sides diffusing light while protecting flames from drafts. But light was only the beginning. Ventilating these tunnels required equal innovation. Miners dug secondary shafts at precise intervals, harnessing natural airflow like underground lungs. When that wasn't enough, they hung cloth screens to direct drafts, or used fire itself to create convection currents, a technique so effective that some Roman-era ventilation systems were still operational in medieval times. The salt mines of Hallstatt in Austria even featured wooden ventilation doors, operated by teams of children who opened and closed them in careful sequences to circulate air. The true marvel, however, lay in their structural engineering. Without modern supports, miners carved stair-step ceilings to distribute weight, leaving strategic columns of untouched stone as natural pillars. In Wales' copper mines, they reinforced tunnels with arches modeled after cathedral designs, unknowingly anticipating modern load-bearing principles. Some mines, like Sweden's Fallon copper mine, became so extensive that their collapse in the 17th century created visible sinkholes above ground. What emerges from these shadowed depths isn't just a story of extraction, but of transformation. Salt mines funded kingdoms. Venice's wealth sprang from Mediterranean salt trade routes. Iron mines armed entire nations. The Breweries of medieval Sweden produced enough high-quality steel to supply Viking raids and Hanseatic merchants alike. And in Bohemia, silver mines minted coins that became Europe's standard currency. These underground networks didn't just supply resources, they built empires. Today, when we flip a light switch or season our food, we're heirs to technologies born in the choking dust of medieval mines, where every swing of a pickaxe echoed with the sound of civilization being forged. Castles might look like cold stone fortresses from the outside, but step inside on a winter's day, and you'd find something surprising warmth radiating from the very floors beneath your feet. Medieval engineers didn't just endure the cold, they outsmarted it with Hypocausts, an underground heating system so effective it could make a drafty stone hall feel like a cozy hearth. While the Romans pioneered this technology for their lavish bathhouses, medieval builders adapted it for an entirely different challenge, heating massive, cavernous castles in climates where temperatures plummeted far below what Mediterranean winters could muster. The mechanics were deceptively simple yet brilliant. Beneath the castle's grand halls or monastery dormitories, laborers built a network of brick pillars supporting a raised floor. In a basement chamber, a furnace burned wood or coal, its heat channeled through the gaps between those pillars. As hot air rose, it circulated through hollow spaces within the walls, warming the stones before escaping through strategically placed chimneys. The result, even heat distribution without a single visible flame. The Cistercian monks of Clairvaux Abbey in France took this further, routing hypocaust heat through their scriptorium floors to keep ink from freezing during winter copying sessions, a medieval version of climate-controlled workspaces. But maintaining these systems without modern materials required ingenious workarounds. Instead of metal ducts, builders used clay pipes or lined tunnels with heat-resistant tiles made from local clay and crushed pottery. To prevent smoke buildup, they designed flues with precise angles to create natural drafts, often testing airflow by releasing feathers and observing their path. In colder regions like Scandinavia, some hypocausts doubled as bread ovens, with heat diverted to kitchens after passing through living quarters. Waste not, want not. The true test came during sieges. While attackers shivered outside, defenders could keep their halls warm by fueling hypocausts with anything flammable: dried peat, olive pits, even animal dung when supplies ran low. The Château de Chinon in France had a hypocaust system that could be sealed off during attacks, trapping heat for days like a thermal battery. And in alpine monasteries, monks built heat sinks into their hypocausts, piles of river stones that absorbed excess warmth during the day, radiating it back slowly through the night. What's most striking is how these systems blurred the line between luxury and necessity. In Wales' Caer Castle, archaeologists found evidence that hypocausts heated not just noble chambers but also the servants' quarters, a rare medieval nod to egalitarian comfort. Meanwhile, in Russia's Solovetsky Monastery, monks engineered a hypocaust so efficient it could grow citrus fruits in underground winter gardens, defying the Arctic climate above. These weren't just heating systems, they were declarations of independence from nature's whims. Today, as we adjust our thermostats with a flick of a switch, it's worth remembering that the concept of central heating wasn't invented in the modern era. It was perfected centuries ago, in the soot-stained basements of medieval innovators who refused to let winter win. Beneath the vaulted ceilings of medieval monasteries and the stone floors of royal castles, a different kind of warfare was waged, not with swords but with symbols. Hidden cryptography chambers became the clandestine workshops where scholars turned language into weapons, crafting codes so sophisticated they rivaled modern encryption. These weren't just dusty scriptoriums, they were locked, soundproofed rooms, often accessible only through disguised doors or trapdoors, where ink-stained hands transformed sensitive messages into unreadable scripts. The Abbey of Monte Cassino in Italy housed one such chamber, its walls lined with shelves of cipher keys and manuscripts filled with seemingly nonsensical letter arrangements. Here, monks developed the first polyalphabetic ciphers, layered codes that changed substitution patterns mid-message, a technique so advanced it wouldn't be broken for centuries. But why the secrecy? In an era where a single intercepted letter could topple kingdoms or spark religious persecution, cryptography wasn't just academic, it was survival. The Vatican's underground archives reveal encrypted correspondence between popes and monarchs, their letters peppered with null symbols, fake characters meant to mislead, and grill ciphers where a physical mask revealed only certain words. Some codes were even designed to self-destruct, written in unstable inks that faded when exposed to air, or on wax tablets that could be swiftly melted. The Alhambra decree's expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492 was reportedly drafted in a subterranean chamber using a cipher that altered key dates, buying time for diplomats to negotiate. The real marvel, though, lay in their low-tech ingenuity. Without computers, cryptographers relied on music, art, and even kitchen recipes to disguise their work. The Voynich manuscript, that infamous unreadable book, may have been born in such a chamber, its botanical illustrations possibly encoding herbal cures or alchemical formulas. Other scholars hid messages in plain sight, like the monks who composed seemingly innocent hymns with lyrics that, when read vertically, spelled out covert instructions. Today, as we tap passwords into glowing screens, it's easy to forget that the battle for digital privacy began in these shadowed rooms. The techniques pioneered underground frequency analysis, steganography, even early forms of public key encryption laid the groundwork for everything from diplomatic cables to blockchain. Yet for all we've decoded, some secrets remain. Buried beneath Prague's old town, a chamber reportedly belonging to Rabbi Lowe still guards the original Golem's activation cipher, a code said to animate clay. Whether myth or lost science, it's a reminder that in the medieval world, knowledge wasn't just power, it was magic waiting to be unlocked. When invaders swept across Cappadocia's rocky plains, they found abandoned villages and silent streets, but the people hadn't fled. They'd vanished straight down. Durin, Kuyu, Turkey's subterranean fortress city, wasn't just a hiding place, it was an 8-level marvel of defensive engineering, capable of sheltering 20,000 people for months. Carved from soft volcanic rock, this labyrinth spanned nearly 250 feet deep, its narrow staircases twisting like coiled springs to slow attackers. But what truly astonishes isn't its scale, it's how every detail was optimized for survival. Massive circular stone doors, each weighing up to a ton, could seal passages in seconds, their rolling mechanisms still functional today. Ventilation shafts disguised as wells provided fresh air while preventing smoke detection from above. Underground churches kept morale high during sieges, their ceilings blackened by centuries of oil lamps. Even livestock had dedicated stables with troughs carved directly into the rock. The coordination required to build such a network defies belief. Without modern surveying tools, teams working from opposite ends met with near-perfect alignment, their tunnels intersecting at precise angles. Communication relied on a system of tapping codes transmitted through the rock early seismic messaging. Each level had specialized roles. Upper floors housed kitchens with smokeless hearths, middle levels contained communal spaces with hidden escape routes, and the deepest chambers stored wine, oil, and grain in temperature-stable vaults. The Byzantines later added secret tunnels connecting Durin Kuyu to neighboring underground cities, creating a subterranean highway system stretching over 60 miles. But Durin Kuyu was just one node in a vast underground network. Similar cities like Catacombs featured ingenious security measures, false corridors leading to dead ends, or drops disguised as floors. Some included panic rooms with independent air supplies, while others had vertical shafts for pouring boiling oil onto invaders. The real genius, though, lay in their adaptability. When the Seljuks introduced siege tactics that made above-ground defenses obsolete, Cappadocians simply retreated downward, turning their greatest vulnerability, soft rock, into an impenetrable advantage. Today, archaeologists still uncover new chambers, some revealing unexpected amenities like wineries with fermentation pits or schools with stone desks. These weren't just survival bunkers, they were fully realized underground societies where every carved niche told a story of resilience. As modern cities ponder climate change and conflict, Durin Kuyu stands as a testament to human ingenuity, proof that sometimes the best defense isn't to stand tall but to dig deep. The faint gurgle of water echoing through castle basements wasn't just the sound of plumbing, it was the heartbeat of medieval industry. Subterranean water mills transformed rushing currents into mechanical power, hidden from enemy eyes yet vital to daily survival. Take Sutter's Mill in Germany's Black Forest, where an entire grain grinding operation thrived beneath the earth. Engineers diverted a nearby river into a carefully sloped tunnel, its flow calibrated to turn massive wooden wheels without causing erosion or flooding. The genius wasn't just in concealment, it was in their mastery of hydraulics. These mills operated on principles we'd recognize today as precursor to hydroelectric power, converting kinetic energy with startling efficiency. But how did they control water flow without modern valves or sensors? The answer lay in their meticulous channel designs. By carving narrow mill races that funneled water into spiraling patterns, medieval builders created natural acceleration chambers. In France's underground mills at Provence, sluice gates made of oak and iron could be adjusted by ropes from above, allowing workers to fine-tune speed without descending. Some mills even featured primitive turbines, horizontal wheels with angled blades that maximized torque for metalworking hammers. The Cistercian monks of Clairvaux Abbey took this further, constructing a multi-level system where a single water source sequentially powered a grain mill, a forge bellows, and finally a laundry press before rejoining the river. The strategic advantages were immense. Unlike windmills vulnerable to sabotage, hidden water mills kept production running during sieges. Austria's Hohenwürfen castle mill could grind enough flour daily to feed 500 soldiers, its existence unknown to attackers camped just outside the walls. Even more impressive were the sound-dampening techniques. Mills like England's Warkworth Hermitage were lined with straw-packed walls to muffle the rhythmic thumping of grindstones, preventing acoustic detection. Archaeological evidence reveals even darker adaptations. Beneath Poland's Malbork Castle, excavators found a mill connected to the dungeon, its ceaseless groaning used as psychological torture. Other mills doubled as secret communication hubs. The rhythmic changes in wheel speed could relay coded messages between castles via underground streams. This wasn't just engineering, it was subterranean theater where every splash and creak served multiple purposes. Today, remnants of these systems still surface unexpectedly. A farmer's plow striking ancient millstones in Ireland, or urban explorers discovering intact wheel chambers beneath modern French towns. They remind us that medieval innovation wasn't always about grand cathedrals or shining armor. Sometimes, history's most brilliant advancements were quite literally underfoot, turning darkness into power, one relentless drop at a time. Beneath the flickering glow of candlelight, where the scent of sulfur and mercury hung heavy in the air, medieval alchemists pursued secrets that blurred the line between science and sorcery. Their hidden laboratories, often buried deep under monasteries or tucked behind false walls in noble estates, were more than just clandestine workshops. They were the birthplaces of chemical experimentation. Take the underground chamber beneath Prague's Charles Bridge, where the legendary alchemist Edward Kelly allegedly worked. Disguised as a wine cellar, its walls were lined with intricate astrological symbols and shelves of mysterious glass vessels, some still stained with residues of arsenic and antimony centuries later. These weren't just mad scientists mixing potions, they were pioneers methodically documenting reactions that would later form the foundation of modern chemistry. What's often overlooked is how these spaces were engineered for secrecy and safety. Ventilation shafts disguised as chimneys prevented toxic fumes from betraying their location, while sand-filled pits beneath work tables could quickly smother accidental fires. Some labs, like those hidden beneath the Abbey of Saint Denis in France, even had running water channels to wash away evidence of failed experiments, a medieval version of a cleanroom. The tools themselves were marvels of ingenuity, alembics made from specially tempered glass that resisted cracking under rapid temperature changes, and furnaces with adjustable airflow flaps to precisely control heat. But the real legacy of these labs lies in their accidental discoveries. While searching for mythical transmutation, alchemists stumbled upon processes we still use today. The Benedictine monk Basil Valentine, working in a concealed lab beneath a German monastery, discovered hydrochloric acid by distilling salt with vitriol, a technique that became essential for metallurgy. In Spain, Arabic alchemists refining mercury sulfide in hidden cellars near Toledo inadvertently created vermilion pigment, revolutionizing medieval art. Even something as mundane as porcelain glaze traces its roots to alchemical experiments with kaolin clay in underground kilns. Perhaps most fascinating were their coded records. Fearing persecution for heresy, alchemists wrote in elaborate symbolic languages dragons representing volatile elements, suns and moons symbolizing gold and silver. The Voynich manuscript, with its undeciphered botanical illustrations, may well be the lab notes of an alchemist who never wanted his methods understood. Yet these very codes forced them to think systematically, laying the groundwork for the periodic tables organization. Today, as we peer into their shadowy world through fragmented manuscripts and archaeological remnants, one truth emerges. These underground innovators weren't just chasing fool's gold. They were forging the tools, techniques, and theoretical frameworks that would centuries later turn alchemy into chemistry. Every modern laboratory, with its beakers and burners, owes a silent debt to those who worked in secrecy, where the quest for magic unexpectedly unveiled the laws of nature. In the scorching deserts of Persia, where summer temperatures could melt stone, medieval engineers performed what seemed like magic. They kept ice frozen year-round. The secret lay in the Yachchel, a towering conical structure that functioned as a natural refrigerator centuries before electricity. These ice houses weren't just pits in the ground. They were precision-engineered thermal regulators, harnessing physics to defy the desert heat. At their core was a simple but brilliant principle: insulation through architecture. Thick walls made of sarouge, a special mortar mixing clay, sand, ash, and goat hair, acted like a thermos, while wind catchers on the roof funneled cool nighttime air downward. Underground channels diverted meltwater away from the stored ice, preventing heat generating humidity. The result, interior temperatures could plunge below freezing even as the outside air baked at over 100 degrees. But the real innovation was in their scalability. Some Yachchels, like the monumental structure near Kerman, stood over 60 feet tall with storage chambers reaching depths of 50 feet, capable of preserving hundreds of tons of ice. Workers harvested ice from nearby mountains during winter, or made it artificially by pouring water into shallow nighttime pools where rapid evaporation and radiant cooling formed thin layers by dawn. This ice was then packed in straw and sawdust natural insulators that trapped tiny air pockets before being stacked in the Yachchel's central chamber. The structure's distinctive dome shape wasn't just aesthetic. It promoted hot air to rise and escape through vents, creating a continuous cooling cycle. The impact went far beyond luxury. In an era before canning or refrigeration, Yachchels preserved not just ice but perishable medicines, royal delicacies, and even donated organs for early surgical experiments. The Safavid kings used ice from Yachchels to cool royal falcons during hunting expeditions, while physicians relied on them to store antivenoms and herbal extracts. Some were even adapted for food production. The underground chill allowed Persian chefs to pioneer early versions of sorbet by mixing ice with fruit syrups. What's astonishing is how these structures spread globally through trade routes. Variations appeared in Mughal India's ice pits, Ottoman Turkey's subterranean, bujines, and even Renaissance Italy's neviere, where snow was pressed into wells lined with tree bark. The technology was so effective that some Yachchels remained operational into the 20th century, outlasting modern refrigerators in remote areas. Today, as we grapple with energy-intensive cooling systems, these ancient ice houses offer a masterclass in passive climate control, proving that sometimes the most sustainable solutions aren't inventions of the future, but rediscoveries from the past. Beneath the flagstones of medieval castles and the roots of ancient oak trees, fortunes vanished without a trace, not lost, but deliberately hidden. Kings and nobles didn't just lock their wealth in chests, they buried it in labyrinthine underground vaults, engineered to defy even the most determined thieves. The Knights Templar, that enigmatic order of warrior monks, became legendary for their disappearing treasures. When King Philip IV of France moved against them in 1307, his men stormed Templar strongholds only to find vaults emptied, their contents vanished into a network of tunnels and secret chambers. To this day, rumors persist of their hoard gold, sacred relics, even the lost Ark of the Covenant hidden somewhere beneath the rolling hills of France or the jagged coasts of Scotland. But the Templars were far from alone. Across Europe, underground treasure chambers were designed with devious ingenuity. Some employed blind vaults, rooms accessible only by removing a specific keystone from an unrelated archway. Others relied on psychological tricks, like the Duke of Bavaria's hoard, concealed beneath a fake burial crypt marked with ominous warnings in dead languages. The most secure systems didn't just hide wealth, they protected it with natural traps. In Bohemia, one noble family diverted an underground stream to flood their vault if the wrong sequence of levers was pulled, while the Hungarian crown jewels were allegedly stored in a chamber where the floor would collapse under intruders' weight, dropping them into a pit of quicklime. What fascinates archaeologists isn't just the engineering, but the cultural footprint of these vaults. Viking sagas speak of silver buried beneath elf stones, natural rock formations considered too cursed to disturb. In Spain, Moorish treasure maps were encoded in the tile patterns of mosque floors, readable only to those who knew which angles to view them from. Even the layout of some castles hints at hidden wealth, spiral staircases twisting counter-clockwise to disadvantage right-handed attackers, or chapel altars positioned directly above vault access points, exploiting religious taboos against theft. Modern technology has unearthed tantalizing clues, ground-penetrating radar revealing voids beneath Romania's Ponari Castle, or sonar detecting metal concentrations under Loch Arkaig in Scotland, where Jacobite gold may still lie. Yet for every discovery, countless vaults remain sealed, their secrets guarded by time. Perhaps the greatest treasure isn't what they held, but what they represent. A medieval obsession with security so profound, it turned Earth itself into a fortress. Today, as banks rely on digital encryption, these stone-lined chambers remind us that the desire to protect what's precious is as old as civilization itself. When castle walls bristled with enemy arrows and the gates trembled under battering rams, medieval defenders still found ways to whisper secrets across the battlefield, through tunnels dug deep beneath the earth. The Château de Chinon in France's Loire Valley perfected this art, its hidden communication network allowing commanders to coordinate counterattacks without risking a single scout. But these weren't just simple passageways, they were acoustic marvels designed with the precision of a musical instrument. Narrow, winding tunnels amplified even the lightest footstep, while smooth, curved walls focused sound waves like stone megaphones. Guards stationed at listening posts could identify intruders by the rhythm of their steps, a medieval version of sonar. The true genius lay in their layered security. Some tunnels featured whisper chambers, where domed ceilings allowed two people standing at specific points to hear each other clearly, even as others midway between them caught only muffled echoes. At Mont Saint-Michel, monks developed a coded tapping system using the castle's natural resonance. Different sections of the walls responded to distinct frequencies, creating an underground Morse code. Other castles disguised tunnel entrances as decorative fountains or hearths, their openings concealed by the very elements they mimicked. Perhaps the most devious innovation was the use of misdirection. The Castle of Foix in the Pyrenees included decoy tunnels that led to dead ends or collapsed sections, while the real communication lines ran through seemingly solid walls. One surviving manuscript describes how a thin layer of plaster concealed hollow spaces. Tapping the right sequence of stones would reveal a hidden corridor. And at Chinon, archaeologists recently discovered that some tunnels had sound locks, abrupt changes in diameter that prevented voices from carrying beyond certain points, creating natural audio dead zones. These systems didn't just transmit messages, they shaped history. During the 100 Years' War, Joan of Arc's famous meeting with the Dauphin at Chinon may have been coordinated through these passages, their secrecy ensuring her safe passage past English spies. Later, Huguenot rebels used similar tunnels to organize resistance during France's wars of religion. Today, as we tap messages on glass screens, it's worth remembering that the need for secure communication isn't a modern obsession, it's an ancient imperative carved in stone beneath our feet. Deep beneath medieval monasteries, where the air hung thick with the scent of yeast and oak, monks perfected an alchemy of flavor that would shape entire cultures. These underground breweries and wineries weren't just storage spaces, they were precision-calibrated fermentation laboratories, where temperature and humidity were controlled with techniques modern vintners still marvel at. The Trappist monks of Belgium's Orval Abbey provide the most striking example, their cellars honeycombed beneath layers of limestone that maintained a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Without thermometers, they relied on nature's cues. The slow drip of condensation on walls indicated ideal humidity, while the behavior of fermentation bubbles observed through glass-stoppered sampling holes revealed exact stages of the brewing process. Some monasteries even kept living thermometers, lizards or toads in specially designed alcoves whose activity levels signaled temperature changes to attentive brothers. What set these subterranean operations apart was their mastery of microbial terroir. Over centuries, monks cultivated unique strains of yeast that thrived in their specific underground environments. The legendary Chimay Breweries' distinctive flavor profile comes from Brettanomyces yeast strains that evolved in their sandstone cellars, impossible to replicate above ground. Wine caves like those beneath Hungary's Tokaj region took this further, encouraging noble rot fungus in carefully monitored underground microclimates to create the world's first botrytized dessert wines. The monks didn't just adapt to their environments, they engineered them, stacking barrels in spirals to promote even air circulation, or embedding crushed seashells in walls to regulate acidity through gradual calcium leaching. The strategic advantages extended beyond flavor. During the 30 Years' War, Swedish troops ransacked above-ground breweries while monastic cellars remained untouched, their entrances camouflaged as shrines or burial niches. Some, like the Pilsner Urquell cellars in Bohemia, included emergency escape tunnels disguised as barrel racks, a feature famously used during the Hussite Wars. The cellars themselves became living archives. The monks of Andechs Monastery in Germany still use 12th century fermentation logs carved into the walls, their recipes preserved in coded symbols resembling musical notation. Perhaps most impressive was their waste, not ingenuity. Spent grain became livestock feed, Carbon dioxide from fermentation was channeled to suffocate pantry pests, and even the heat generated by active vats warmed adjacent scriptoriums. In Austria's Melk Abbey, archaeologists recently discovered a cascading system where wine fermentation heat was harnessed to jump-start beer brewing in interconnected chambers, a medieval example of energy recycling. These underground sanctuaries of flavor did more than preserve traditions, they advanced them through darkness, proving that sometimes the finest things in life need to mature unseen. Beneath the echoing halls of medieval monasteries where candlelight barely pierced the gloom, an even deeper darkness safeguarded civilization's most precious treasures, not gold or relics but words. Secret libraries hidden in climate-controlled chambers underground became the fortresses of knowledge during an age when books were rarer than jewels. These weren't mere storage rooms, they were meticulously engineered sanctuaries where temperature, humidity, and even airflow were calibrated to preserve parchment and ink across centuries. The Vatican's subterranean archives, with their miles of shelving and labyrinthine corridors, are just the most famous example. But from the salt mines of Salzburg to the chalk caverns beneath Canterbury, monks carved out spaces where texts could survive wars, fires, and the slow decay of time. The engineering behind these libraries was as precise as the scribe's calligraphy. Walls lined with a special mortar of crushed limestone and egg whites absorbed excess moisture, while narrow ventilation shafts maintained airflow without exposing manuscripts to damaging drafts. At England's York Minster, librarians buried texts in clay-lined pits that kept vellum supple by mimicking the conditions of a sealed tomb. Some monasteries went further. The monks of St. Gall in Switzerland embedded iron rods in their library walls to divert lightning strikes, while Byzantine scribes stored particularly fragile texts in lead-lined chests that stabilized temperature like primitive refrigeration units. But preservation was only half the battle. These underground vaults also protected knowledge from deliberate destruction. During the Viking raids, Irish monks tucked illuminated gospels into waterproof satchels and lowered them into peat bogs. In Spain's Pyrenees, Mozarabic Christians hollowed out caves to hide liturgical texts from Islamic purges, their entrances concealed behind cascading waterfalls. The most ingenious might have been the Coptic Christians of Egypt, who bricked up entire libraries within monastery walls, leaving cryptic clues in marginalia for future generations to rediscover them. What's haunting is how much remains unread. The Vatican's archives alone house over 53 miles of shelving, much of it uncatalogued, a literal buried treasure of historical insight. Recent infrared scans of palimpsests, manuscripts scrubbed clean and rewritten during parchment shortages, have revealed erased works by Archimedes and lost speeches of Cicero. In Ethiopia's remote mountain monasteries, scholars are still uncovering troves of early Christian texts preserved in caves, their pages intact thanks to the arid microclimates. And who knows what might lie beneath Prague's Strahov Monastery, where rumors persist of an underground chamber sealed since the Hussite Wars, allegedly containing heretical texts deemed too dangerous to burn. These hidden libraries did more than save books, they safeguarded the very continuity of thought. When the Baghdad House of Wisdom was sacked by the Mongols or the Library of Alexandria smoldered, it was these subterranean collections that kept philosophy, medicine, and astronomy alive. A single manuscript smuggled underground in 9th century Toledo might contain the only surviving fragment of a Greek play or an Arab mathematician's breakthrough. Today, as digital archives promise immortality for knowledge, these medieval vaults remind us that preservation has always been a quiet, desperate act of defiance, one that often happened in the dark, where the flicker of a single candle could keep an entire civilization's memory alive. Beneath the grand halls and bustling courtyards of medieval castles lay a realm of deliberate cruelty, subterranean prisons designed not just to confine, but to break the human spirit. The infamous Oubliettes of France took this philosophy to chilling extremes. Named from the French word oublier, meaning to forget, these bottle-shaped pits were more than cells. They were vertical tombs where prisoners were lowered through a narrow hole in the ceiling, left to rot in darkness so complete it erased all sense of time. The Château de Yachchels still preserves one such pit, its smooth walls offering no handholds, the only light filtering weakly through a grated opening 12 feet above. But what made these spaces truly sinister wasn't just their physical discomfort. It was the psychological warfare woven into their very architecture. Some oubliettes incorporated sensory deprivation techniques centuries before modern psychology identified their effects. At Coucy Castle, prisoners reported hearing phantom whispers, a clever acoustic trick achieved by wind passing through carefully placed ventilation shafts. Others, like the dungeon beneath Warwick Castle, featured weeping walls that constantly dripped mineral-rich water, creating the illusion of being buried alive as the moisture slowly calcified prisoners' hair and clothing into grotesque stone-like shrouds. The most psychologically brutal might have been the Zweiterm in Bohemia's Hauska Castle. Built above a natural fissure believed to be a gateway to hell, prisoners were told demons would visit them at midnight, an early form of sleep deprivation torture. Yet these prisons weren't just about inflicting suffering, they were instruments of political theater. When the Duke of Brittany wanted to demonstrate his power, he didn't execute rivals immediately. He had them disappear into underground cells for years before dramatically producing them at strategic moments. The very existence of these dungeons served as a tangible threat. Nobles touring castles would often be shown the oubliettes as a not-so-subtle warning about the consequences of betrayal. Some oubliettes even doubled as propaganda tools. The Hunger Tower at Nuremberg Castle allegedly held prisoners until they starved, but excavations revealed discreet food slots. The captors wanted tales of their ruthlessness to spread, while actually keeping prisoners alive for future ransom or interrogation. What's often overlooked is how these spaces reflected medieval views on crime and punishment. Unlike modern prisons designed for rehabilitation, oubliettes embodied the concept of living death, a permanent removal from society's light. The vertical design itself held symbolic meaning. Descending into the earth represented moral falling, while the circular shape echoed depictions of biblical abysses. Some clergy even argued these pits served a redemptive purpose, the extreme isolation forcing prisoners to confront their sins. Archaeological studies revealed disturbing adaptations. At Chillon Castle in Switzerland, skeletal remains show prisoners developed bowed legs from years of crouching in cramped spaces. In Scotland's Duralton Castle, analysis of the mass murder pit revealed prisoners had been confined with decomposing bodies, a deliberate tactic to induce terror through smell and proximity to death. Yet for all their barbarity, these prisons also sparked resistance. The legendary escape of Bishop Jacques de Molay from an oubliette beneath the temple in Paris became a rallying cry against royal tyranny, proving that even the darkest pits couldn't always extinguish the human will for freedom. Today, as we walk these dank passages on tourist visits, it's easy to dismiss them as relics of a crueler age. But the oubliette's legacy lingers in modern solitary confinement practices, reminding us that the line between medieval punishment and contemporary corrections might be thinner than we'd like to admit. These underground chambers weren't just physical spaces, they were manifestations of power's darkest impulse, where stone and shadow became tools to unravel minds as surely as any rack or iron maiden. The stone corridors beneath the Tower of London hold more than just ghost stories. They conceal the remnants of an underground arms race that shaped medieval warfare. Hidden armories weren't mere storage closets for swords and shields. They were climate-controlled arsenals engineered to keep weapons battle ready for decades. The tower's vaults, some dating back to the 12th century, reveal astonishing preservation techniques. Layers of beeswax rubbed onto chainmail to prevent oxidation, and great yew longbows stored horizontally in racks carved from bog oak, a wood naturally resistant to mold. But what truly set these subterranean caches apart was their strategic design. Unlike above-ground armories vulnerable to fire or raiding parties, underground vaults like those at Dover Castle were built with weeping walls, deliberately porous stones that maintained ideal humidity levels to keep steel from brittling in England's damp climate. The science behind these methods was remarkably sophisticated. Armorers packed arrowheads in barrels of crushed limestone, creating an alkaline environment that neutralized acids from fingerprints or moisture. Crossbow strings were coiled in clay pots with handfuls of peppercorns, not just for spice trade leftovers, but because piperine oil acted as a natural antifungal. Even the placement of weapon racks mattered. At Crac des Chevaliers in Syria, archaeologists found swords stored blade up near ventilation shafts, allowing air circulation while preventing ground moisture from creeping up scabbards. Some armories took inspiration from honeybees. The Teutonic Knights lined their underground vaults with propolis-coated shelves, harnessing the same antimicrobial resin that protects beehives. But preservation was only half the story. These armories doubled as tactical deception tools. The Castel del Monte in Italy featured false inventory markings on crates, outwardly labeled as salted fish barrels to mislead spies. Beneath Malbork Castle, the Teutonic Knights built a decoy armory filled with deliberately rusted weapons, while the real cache lay behind a movable altar in the chapel. Perhaps most ingenious were the emergency systems at Rhodes' Palace of the Grand Master. Hidden channels could flood the armory with seawater in minutes, rendering captured gunpowder useless while leaving metal weapons salvageable. The legacy of these spaces extends beyond medieval times. Modern conservators still employ their techniques. The Tower of London's current preservation lab uses linseed oil treatments nearly identical to those found in 14th century armorer manuals. And when researchers recently unsealed a long-forgotten vault at Caernarfon Castle, they discovered a stash of arrows whose goose feather fletching remained intact after 7 centuries, preserved by a thin layer of rancid butter rubbed into the shafts. These underground caches didn't just store weapons, they safeguarded the very tools of sovereignty, proving that sometimes the strongest defense was keeping your best blades where no one could see them. Beneath the terror-stricken streets of medieval Europe, where the Black Death wiped out entire families in days, a grim yet ingenious solution emerged: underground plague hospitals. These weren't just makeshift wards, they were carefully designed quarantine zones, carved into the earth to isolate the sick while protecting the healthy. Venice's Lazaretto Vecchio, an island transformed into a subterranean treatment center, became a blueprint for infection control. Its labyrinth of tunnels separated patients by disease stage, early infections near the entrance, critical cases deeper inside with lime-washed walls that reflected precious candlelight while neutralizing miasmas. What seems primitive today was revolutionary for its time. Ventilation shafts angled to draw fresh air from sea breezes, and waste channels that flushed directly into tidal currents, preventing contamination of the city's drinking water. But the true innovation lay in their sanitation protocols. Caregivers wore long waxed cloaks and beak-like masks stuffed with herbs, not just for superstition. but because the aromatic blends, often containing cloves and rosemary, genuinely mask the stench of decay while possibly offering mild antibacterial benefits. In Prague's underground plague hospital, archaeologists found remnants of a copper-lined floor drainage system, an early attempt at antimicrobial surfaces, while London's East Smithfield pits revealed layers of quicklime between burial strata, accelerating decomposition while reducing odor. Some French catacombs even show evidence of primitive negative pressure systems, wool curtains soaked in vinegar hung between chambers to trap airborne particles. The psychological toll was unimaginable. Patients in Milan's Ospedale Maggiore underground wards scratched calendars into the soft tufa rock, marking days of isolation. In Edinburgh, tunnel hospitals placed recovering patients near exits where they could glimpse daylight, a small mercy to combat the madness of perpetual darkness. Yet these desperate measures worked. Mortality rates in cities with organized underground systems were notably lower than in those relying solely on above-ground care. Perhaps most haunting are the traces of compassion amid the horror. Excavations at Marseille's Lazaret reveal toys buried with children, and in Vienna's plague pits, skeletons show careful positioning, hands folded with coins over their eyes, suggesting someone took time to provide dignity in death. These underground hospitals weren't just tombs, they were battlegrounds where medieval medicine waged its flawed but courageous war against an invisible enemy. Today, as we face modern pandemics, their legacy lingers, not in their fear, but in their stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. Beneath the cobbled streets of medieval cities and behind the wine cellars of grand estates, history's most pivotal decisions often unfolded not in grand halls, but in hushed subterranean chambers. These secret meeting rooms were masterclasses in discretion, spaces where rebels plotted revolutions, royal councils debated dynasties, and guilds guarded trade secrets with lethal seriousness. Take the Freemasons' hidden lodges, their entrances cleverly disguised as ordinary tavern cellars or even butcher shop cold rooms. A sliding barrel or a pivoting meat rack might reveal a winding staircase leading to a windowless chamber lined with symbols, a space where architecture itself became a language of concealment. But the Masons were far from alone in their underground intrigues. The design of these rooms reveals a chilling attention to detail. In Scotland's Rosslyn Chapel, a subterranean meeting chamber lies beneath the famous Apprentice Pillar, its walls etched with acoustic baffles that distort sound, making eavesdropping impossible. Venetian conspirators met in flooded basements where the slightest footstep sent ripples across the water, a natural intruder alarm. Some, like the Cathars' secret council rooms beneath Montségur, featured whispering corners where voices carried with unnatural clarity between two specific points while remaining inaudible elsewhere, perfect for sharing treasonous plans. Even the furniture served double purposes. Tables with hollow legs held smuggled documents, while candle sconces could pivot to signal danger. What transpired in these shadows often changed the course of history. Beneath Prague's Old Town, Hussite rebels planned their defiance of the Holy Roman Empire in chambers lined with fireproof clay, ensuring no evidence could be burned away by raiding forces. The infamous princes in the tower may have met their fate after a secret council convened in the blood-soaked basement of the Tower of London's Wakefield Tower. And in Spain, the Alhambra decree expelling Jews was allegedly drafted in an underground chamber with 3 separate exits, one for the king, one for the scribe, and a decoy tunnel leading to a dead end to mislead potential assassins. The psychological impact of these spaces cannot be overstated. The very act of descending created a ritualistic transition from the mundane to the consequential. In France's Chinon Castle, the Templars' last Grand Master was interrogated in an underground chamber painted entirely black, a visual metaphor for the order's supposed heresy. Meanwhile, beneath Florence's Palazzo Vecchio, Savonarola's followers met in a room where the walls leaned inward, creating a subconscious sense of pressure to conform during votes. Modern archaeology continues to uncover these hidden chambers, often by accident. A collapsed cellar in Bruges revealed a perfectly preserved meeting room of the medieval Hanseatic League, its tables still set with cipher discs and weighted voting stones. Beneath Istanbul's Grand Bazaar, workers stumbled upon a Byzantine merchant guild's secret chamber, its walls covered in tally marks tracking debts and betrayals. Each discovery peels back another layer of secrecy, reminding us that the medieval world's true levers of power often lay not in sunlight, but in carefully crafted darkness. Deep beneath the hallowed halls of medieval monasteries, where shadows stretched long and candlelight barely reached, an unexpected sight would greet the weary traveler, lush gardens thriving in perpetual twilight. These weren't just root cellars or storage pits, but carefully cultivated subterranean farms where monks coaxed life from the darkness itself. The culinary crypts of Italy's Benedictine abbeys stand as a testament to this ingenuity, their vaulted ceilings draped with vines of spinach and clusters of mushrooms, their walls lined with fragrant herbs that flavored both food and medicine. But how did they grow plants without the sun's embrace? The answer lies in a symphony of reflected light, clever ventilation, and an intimate understanding of nature's resilience. The key was harnessing every stray photon. Monks polished sheets of metal, often discarded armor or shields, into crude mirrors, angling them in ventilation shafts to bounce daylight downward. At the Abbey of St. Gall in Switzerland, excavations revealed a network of glass prisms embedded in the ceiling, scattering light like a primitive fiber optic system. Some monasteries used water-filled crystal vessels to amplify and diffuse sunlight, creating shimmering patterns that rotated with the sun's movement, simulating natural cycles. The most advanced, like the gardens beneath Padua's Orto Botanico, employed light chimneys, tall, whitewashed shafts that funneled and magnified ambient light while blocking harmful ultraviolet rays that might scorch delicate leaves. But light was only part of the equation. These underground gardens were masterclasses in microclimate engineering. The monks of Monte Cassino discovered that certain stones retained heat differently. Basalt tiles warmed seedlings at night, while slate slabs kept roots cool during the day. They stacked planting beds in terraces to exploit natural air currents, with warmer-loving plants like rosemary near the top and shade-tolerant crops like leeks nestled below. In Spain's Al-Andalus region, Moorish-influenced monasteries built subterranean irrigation channels that doubled as humidity regulators, their gently flowing water maintaining the damp air ferns and medicinal mosses craved. The plants themselves were carefully curated for this unique environment. Fast-growing cresses that could thrive in low light, alpine strawberries bred for cool roots, and peculiar ghost varieties of basil and mint with pale leaves adapted to dim conditions. Some monasteries even cultivated bioluminescent fungi along walkways, their eerie glow providing just enough light for midnight harvests, an early example of natural lighting. The culinary impact was profound. French monks perfected a strain of buttery lettuce so delicate it could only grow underground, while German abbey records describe a now-lost shadow carrot with an unusually sweet, almost honeyed flavor when grown away from direct sunlight. These gardens did more than fill stomachs, they expanded botanical knowledge. The darkness forced monks to become meticulous observers, noting how plants behaved without solar cues. Their records contain startlingly accurate descriptions of phototropism and root hydrotropism centuries before these phenomena were formally studied. Some even experimented with early growth recipes, steeping seeds in wine or burying them with charcoal to boost germination, proto-science emerging from necessity. Today, fragments of this wisdom are being rediscovered. Modern urban farmers study these medieval techniques for growing food in basements and bunkers, while NASA has cited the light redirecting methods as inspiration for space station agriculture. The culinary crypts of Italy, now open to visitors, still produce herbs using original 8th century methods. Their silvered mirrors and whispering ventilation shafts a living museum of human ingenuity. In an age where we take grow lights for granted, these sunless gardens remind us that sometimes the most fertile ground for innovation isn't under open skies, but in the quiet darkness where patience and creativity intersect. The glow of a blacksmith's furnace could mean survival for a medieval community, or draw the attention of raiders like a beacon in the night. That's why from the fjords of Iceland to the Scottish Highlands, metalworkers took their craft underground, turning caverns and tunnels into hidden workshops where blades and tools were forged in secret. The Viking forges of Iceland's Reykjanes Peninsula reveal just how advanced these subterranean operations became. Carved into volcanic rock, these chambers weren't just holes in the ground, they were precision-engineered workspaces where every element served multiple purposes. The stone walls absorbed and radiated heat back into the room, maintaining temperatures high enough to work steel without wasting precious fuel. Smoke vents disguised as natural fissures in the rock prevented telltale plumes from betraying their location, while narrow entrance tunnels acted as wind tunnels, using coastal breezes to stoke furnace flames without bellows. Ventilation was the make-or-break challenge in these confined spaces. A single misstep could mean carbon monoxide poisoning or suffocation from smoke buildup. The Vikings solved this with a system of breathing holes, small, strategically placed shafts that created convection currents. Cold air would sink through one opening while hot air and fumes rose through another, creating a continuous flow. Archaeologists at Bessastaðir discovered a particularly clever variation. Forges built near underground streams, where the evaporating water created an upward draft that pulled smoke through ceiling vents. Some workshops even used wool blankets hung in entryways as primitive air filters, trapping soot while allowing airflow, a technique Icelandic blacksmiths reportedly learned from Sami traders. But the true brilliance of these hidden forges lay in their adaptability. When iron deposits were scarce, Viking smiths recycled every scrap. Excavations at Keld reveal piles of twisted nails and broken tools waiting to be melted down, a medieval version of sustainable manufacturing. The underground location also provided unexpected metallurgical benefits. The constant, cool humidity of Iceland's lava tubes created ideal conditions for quenching steel, producing blades with fewer stress fractures than those forged above ground. This may explain why Ulfbert swords, the legendary Viking weapons with near-mythic sharpness, were often produced in these subterranean workshops. What's astonishing is how these techniques spread across different cultures. In the Scottish Highlands, clan armourers built souterrain forges beneath their stone blocks, using identical ventilation methods. The Japanese Tatara iron smelters of the Heian period operated similarly, hiding their telltale glow from rival samurai clans. Even the Crusaders adopted these practices. Recent digs at Crac des Chevaliers uncovered an underground armory with ventilation shafts precisely aligned to seasonal winds, allowing year-round production during sieges. Today, modern metalworkers still study these ancient forges. The steady temperatures and natural airflows have inspired eco-friendly foundry designs, while the concealment techniques inform military field smithing. At Eiríksstaðir in Iceland, experimental archaeologists reconstructed an underground forge using only period tools and produced steel nearly matching Ulfbert quality. These hidden workshops weren't just about survival. They were incubators of innovation, where necessity and secrecy forged advancements that still resonate in metallurgy today. The next time you see a Viking sword in a museum, remember, its razor edge may have been born in the flickering shadows of a lava tube, where fire and stone conspired to create something extraordinary. Beneath the bustling streets of medieval Edinburgh, where the clatter of hooves and shouts of merchants filled the air, a shadow economy thrived in the gloom, a network of underground trade routes so extensive it became a city beneath the city. The Edinburgh vaults, a labyrinth of chambers and tunnels snaking beneath the South Bridge, weren't just storage cellars. They were a meticulously regulated marketplace where legality blurred and commerce flourished beyond the reach of tax collectors and thieves. But what made these hidden passages truly remarkable wasn't their secrecy, it was their sophistication. Merchants navigated this underworld using a system of colored lanterns, red for butchers, blue for clothiers, green for apothecaries, hung at tunnel intersections like subterranean traffic lights. Guards patrolled key junctions, checking lead tokens stamped with the city seal, a medieval version of a vendor's license. Even the tunnels themselves were engineered for efficiency. Narrower passages forced single-file traffic to prevent ambushes, while wider market halls had grooves in the floor to align carts for loading. The vaults operated on a strict lunar calendar, with certain tunnels opening only on moonless nights when smugglers moved contraband like French wine or Flemish wool. Accounting was handled in candlelit alcoves by scribes using a cipher system of notched sticks, one nick for a barrel of salt, two for a crate of spices, later reconciled with above-ground ledgers using deliberately mismatched page numbers. But the real genius lay in their dispute resolution. Without courts or sheriffs underground, merchants relied on tunnel law, a code enforced by elected warden merchants who could ban dishonest traders from the network, a punishment more feared than fines since it meant losing access to the safest trade routes in Scotland. Archaeological finds reveal just how organized these systems were. Excavated tokens show serial numbers corresponding to merchant guild records, while remnants of rope pulleys suggest goods were hoisted directly from riverboats into the tunnels via hidden shafts. Some chambers even had makeshift banking stalls where loans were secured against future deliveries, recorded on wax tablets that could be swiftly melted if raided. The vaults weren't just about avoiding bandits, they were an early experiment in free trade, where regulations emerged organically from necessity rather than royal decree. Today, fragments of this underground economy survive in unexpected ways. The phrase, below the table transactions, may trace roots to these clandestine markets, and modern Edinburgh's street layout still follows the old tunnel routes above ground. As you walk the Royal Mile, remember the real hustle of medieval commerce didn't happen in the shouting crowds overhead, but in the whispering galleries below, where the clink of coins and the hiss of lanterns once shaped a city's fortune from the shadows. Beneath the opulent halls of Hampton Court Palace, where Henry Roman VIII once hosted lavish banquets, a shadow world pulsed with whispered secrets, a network of hidden passages designed not for escape, but for eavesdropping. These weren't just architectural quirks, they were the medieval equivalent of a surveillance state, engineered to give Tudor monarchs an unnerving advantage, the ability to hear conversations no ruler was meant to overhear. The most infamous, the Horn Room Passage, curled like a serpent behind the palace's tapestry-lined walls, its narrow corridors barely wide enough for a single spy to slither through. Peepholes disguised as decorative carvings allowed observers to monitor the Cardinal Wolsey's private chambers, while strategically placed ventilation shafts carried voices with eerie clarity to listening posts above. But Hampton Court was just the tip of the iceberg. Similar spy tunnels twisted beneath castles from Prague to Constantinople, turning stone walls into porous membranes of intrigue. The science behind these passages reveals chilling sophistication. At Château de Blois in France, engineers angled secret corridors to exploit natural acoustics. Certain spots amplified whispers from rooms 30 feet away while deadening sounds from adjacent hallways. Some tunnels featured sound mirrors, curved surfaces that focused specific frequencies toward hidden listeners. The Doge Palace in Venice took this further, embedding bronze listening tubes in marble pillars that funneled conversations straight to scribes in underground chambers, where every word was recorded in coded ledgers. These weren't crude holes in the wall, they were precision instruments of control, leveraging medieval physics to bend sound itself to the state's will. Espionage tunnels didn't just gather information, they manufactured it. Beneath Edinburgh Castle, archaeologists discovered a false confession chamber where prisoners were led through winding passages before interrogation, their disorientation making them susceptible to fabricated evidence. In Castel Sant'Angelo, papal agents used hidden galleries to stage supernatural phenomena, dropping forged letters miraculously into cells or projecting ghostly voices to extract confessions through psychological terror. The most elaborate deception might have been in Spain's Alhambra, where Moorish rulers built parallel spy tunnels behind diplomatic meeting rooms, allowing advisors to pass notes through sliding panels during negotiations, creating the illusion of clairvoyance. The human cost of these systems was staggering. Chroniclers recount how Anne Boleyn's alleged infidelities were confirmed by spies listening through floor grates at Hampton Court, testimony likely coerced or invented to justify her execution. In Byzantium, Emperor Justinian's secret tunnels beneath the Hippodrome fed him rumors that sparked the Nika revolt massacres. Yet for all their darkness, these passages also sheltered resistance. The same tunnels Catholic priests used to evade Elizabeth I's pursuers in England later hid Jewish families during the Spanish Inquisition, proving that tools of oppression could become lifelines for the persecuted. Modern archaeology continues to uncover their secrets. Ground-penetrating radar recently revealed an unknown tunnel branch beneath Versailles, possibly used to spy on Marie Antoinette. In Istanbul, restorers found Ottoman listening devices embedded in Topkapi Palace's latticework delicate filigree that concealed carved channels directing sound. These discoveries remind us that the medieval world's greatest battles weren't always fought with swords, but with stolen words and engineered echoes. In an age before wiretaps or satellites, power belonged to those who mastered the art of hearing without being seen, where the softest footfall in a hidden corridor could topple empires. Beneath the bustling streets of ancient Rome, where the clatter of chariot wheels and the shouts of merchants filled the air, a secret spiritual revolution was unfolding in the darkness. The Mithraic temples, or Mithraea, were more than just hidden places of worship. They were meticulously designed cosmic maps carved into the earth itself. These subterranean sanctuaries, often tucked beneath ordinary homes or disguised as wine cellars, were the sacred meeting grounds for followers of Mithras, a mysterious sun god whose cult rivaled early Christianity. Step into one of these chambers, and you'd find yourself in a windowless, barrel-vaulted space designed to mimic the cosmos, the ceiling painted with stars, the walls adorned with symbols of the zodiac, and at the center, an altar depicting Mithras slaying the cosmic bull, a scene charged with layers of celestial meaning. The very architecture of these temples revealed their spiritual significance. Most were intentionally built to face east, aligning with the rising sun, a symbol of rebirth central to Mithraic beliefs. The narrow, descending entrance passages weren't just for secrecy. They represented the soul's journey into the underworld before emerging transformed. Initiates would progress through 7 grades of membership, each associated with a planet Raven Mercury, Bride Venus, Soldier Mars, and so on, moving physically through different sections of the temple that corresponded to ascending levels of spiritual enlightenment. The air in these chambers would have been thick with the scent of burning frankincense and the murmur of chants, the flickering torchlight casting dancing shadows that brought the celestial imagery to life. But why go underground? Persecution was only part of the answer. For Mithraists, the earth's depths held profound symbolism. The womb of creation, the realm where seeds germinated before bursting into life. By worshipping below ground, they connected with the god's mythical birth from a rock and mirrored his journey through darkness into light. Some Mithraea even incorporated natural caves or were built near springs, blending the sacred with the elemental. The temple beneath Rome's Basilica of San Clement offers a stunning example, 3 layers deep, with a babbling underground stream that practitioners believed carried the voice of the divine. Archaeological discoveries continue to unveil their secrets. At the Mithraeum of the Seven Spheres in Ostia, a marble floor inlaid with colored stones maps the planetary spheres, while London's Temple of Mithras revealed ritual feasting vessels still bearing traces of wine mixed with blood, likely from sacrificial offerings. These underground chambers weren't just places to hide, they were portals to another world, where every shadow held meaning and every ritual step brought worshippers closer to the mysteries of the universe. In a time when religion was as much about experience as belief, the Mithraea offered something neither grand cathedrals nor open-air temples could: the transformative power of sacred darkness. Beneath the cobbled streets and crowded marketplaces of medieval London, an invisible battle raged, one that pitted human ingenuity against the relentless threat of disease. The city's underground waste systems, though primitive by modern standards, were a desperate and surprisingly sophisticated attempt to tame the filth that threatened to choke urban life. Unlike the grand aqueducts or hidden tunnels of other innovations, these sewers were born from grim necessity, evolving from open ditches into purpose-built channels that carried waste away from densely packed neighborhoods. The Fleet River, once a pristine waterway, became London's main sewer by the 14th century, its banks lined with latrines that emptied directly into its sluggish flow. But when the river clogged with refuse, the city faced a crisis that demanded more than just makeshift solutions. The real breakthrough came with the construction of cesspits, a deep, stone-lined chambers dug beneath homes and taverns to collect waste before it could seep into streets or water sources. These weren't just holes in the ground, they were carefully engineered to minimize contamination. Builders layered the pits with gravel and sand to filter liquids, while solid waste was periodically scooped out by gong farmers, who transported it beyond city walls for use as fertilizer. Some pits even featured ventilation shafts topped with perforated stones, allowing methane to escape while reducing the stench that could spread disease. In wealthier districts like Cheapside, interconnected brick tunnels funneled waste toward the Thames, their slopes calculated by masons using nothing more than weighted strings and trial and error observations of water flow. But how did these systems prevent disease when germ theory was still centuries away? Medieval Londoners operated on a mix of observation and folk wisdom. They noticed that neighborhoods with proper drainage suffered fewer outbreaks of the bloody flux, dysentery, and sweating sickness. City ordinances required butchers and tanners to dispose of offal in designated pits rather than streets, while scavengers were hired to clear organic waste before it could rot. The most effective measures were surprisingly modern. Some cesspits were deliberately located downstream of wells, instinctively avoiding fecal oral contamination, while others used lime, a natural disinfectant, to neutralize waste. The legacy of these early systems is etched into modern cities. London's Great Stink of 1858, which finally spurred construction of Joseph Bazalgette's sewer network, was just the climax of a sanitation struggle that began in the Middle Ages. Many of Bazalgette's tunnels followed the exact routes of medieval drains, proving their builders had intuitively grasped the city's natural watersheds. Even the humble manhole cover descends from medieval stink pipes, access points for cleaning tunnels that doubled as vents. What's most remarkable is how these innovations emerged without microscopes or scientific understanding. When the Black Death ravaged Europe, cities with robust waste systems like Milan and Nuremberg often fared better, not because they knew about bacteria, but because they'd learned through hard experience that cleanliness and distance from filth mattered. London's medieval sewers were far from perfect. Overflows were common, and the Thames remained a toxic soup, but they represented a pivotal shift from passive suffering to active problem-solving. In their crude, pragmatic way, these underground channels were the first volley in humanity's long war against invisible enemies, proving that even in the darkest of ages, light and fresh air could be found by looking downward. From aqueducts that defied gravity to crypts that guarded both the dead and the living, these 25 underground marvels prove medieval minds saw the earth not as a barrier but as a blank canvas. Their innovations weren't just functional, they were philosophical, transforming darkness into opportunity and secrecy into strength. Consider the sheer range: ice houses that outsmarted desert heat, forges that hid their fire from enemies, even libraries where knowledge hibernated through centuries of chaos. Each wasn't merely a solution to a problem, but a reimagining of what the world could be. What's most striking isn't just their ingenuity, but their humility. Unlike towering cathedrals or sprawling castles, these creations demanded no admiration from the surface. Their brilliance lay in their invisibility, their power in their silence. The medieval world understood something we often forget: progress doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through the cracks in stone, or flows unseen like water through a canat. Today, as we drill deeper for geothermal energy or bury fiber optic cables, we're walking the same path, just with flashier tools. Yet for all we've uncovered, the earth still guards its secrets. How many more tunnels lie silt-filled beneath modern cities? What manuscripts might molder in undiscovered crypts? The recent discovery of a hidden chamber beneath Shakespeare's Curtain Theatre proves history still has surprises to yield. And that's the real magic, not just what they built, but what we've yet to find. So the next time you walk an old city streets, pause. Beneath your feet could be a forgotten mill channel, a smuggler's passage, or an alchemist's scratched equations. The past isn't behind us, it's below us, waiting for the curious to listen. If this journey through the depths has sparked your imagination, let me know what mysteries you'd unravel in the comments. And for more stories where history's shadows come to light, hit subscribe. After all, the greatest discoveries often begin with a simple question: what's down there?